a video talking about how D&D. He had a excuse me. He had a video talking about how D&D is magical because the memories you make in it are only present for the people who were there. It's the best part of D&D isn't the dice; it's the little magical like dimension of memories you make with your friends. And then he made a Patreon and took a bunch of videos off of YouTube down to put them onto the Patreon. And I don't know if that one actually made it onto Patreon. I looked for it and didn't find it. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I just didn't find it. And for my money, that's his best video. And it makes me sad that it's not, available.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, because there's one video that I'm assuming. So I'm not part of his. I'm not part of any Patreon, actually. I have different plans for my disposable income, I guess, is what the way.
Sure.
And either way, so I don't know, because there was one particular video that he did about invisibility. And I've been trying to find it because there was a reference he made and I can't remember it, but now the video is taken off. I'm assuming it's on Patreon or something like that. But what I found very, very funny is that we're very much interested in very similar things you are, both gaming and but also things like the topics of books that we read and the type of media we consume. We do differ, as people do, but we have similar interests. But I found this also very interesting this week, that there was a lot of D&D content put out into the YouTube world and into the streaming world in other ways, is that it also very largely depends on how content is presented, if it's appealing. And that got me thinking on how a game is presented and how a situation is presented, how a challenge is presented, and if it makes it appealing or not, even if it's the same challenge, even if it's the same die you have to roll, same numbers you have to do, same everything. So mechanically it might be one thing, but presentation makes such an important difference that I don't know if it's something that we as in this case professional dungeon masters, but dungeon masters in general, or game masters,
it isn't something we've talked about. It's something we should talk about. I agree. Two of my favorite D&D people you might go to the internet and get information and advice from present as fairly abrasive, and I usually have to say get over it, and like don't listen to how they're saying it, listen to what they're saying, because their advice is really solid. Professor Dungeon Master on Dungeon Craft, a lot of what he says, I think all of what he says, is thought experiments. He said that recently in a Facebook chat. Somebody was like, hey, do you actually do all the shit you say? And he goes, I did. I tried all of it. Some of it I kept, some of it I didn't, like player facing combat roles. He tried it. He did it for a while. He went, more trouble than it's worth. And I agree. The angry dungeon master is cranky for sure. He is. It's part of the shtick. He's going to call you stupid. And he's going to be mean and angry, and he's not a joy to read most of the time. But his advice is almost always practical. Like his article on why metagaming is your in this case being the dungeon master, metagaming is your fault. If it happens, it's on you every single time. And he's not wrong. Like that article is pages long and scathing. And if you can get over the very abrasive, like 4 grit sandpaper presentation, he's got a bunch of solid points. Whereas then you go over to the Alexandrian, who also has a bunch of really great points, but takes forever to spit them out.
Oh my lord, yes.
Like, you have a great point. I would rather you yelled your point at me in 30 seconds than you took 2 hours to be nice about it. That's why the XDM book, the first one, didn't sell very well. Not for a long time anyway, because Tracy Hickman takes 150 pages to say you're doing it wrong. And nobody wants to be told they're doing it wrong for 150 pages. The last 10 pages are really great when he gets around to telling you what you might do different. And I'm just, maybe because I don't know why I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that.
And that's absolutely fine. And I'm thinking that actually there are people who find that appealing.
I do.
Because of course, not only are you okay with it, as in can you stomach through it because there's something good at the end, but maybe you actually enjoy that type of presentation, that type of delivery of information.
Oh, I do, because I think it's honest. I actually think the angry GM, I would love to meet him in person someday because I'd be interested to see how much of that is a shtick and how much of that is who he actually is. But I've met Professor Dungeon Master. We sat at a table and rolled dice together and hung out at Gen Con, and he is that guy. He's a professor, and I don't think he can turn it off. Like and I think that's just who he is. But it also lets me not take it personally when he says, I'm wearing my +1 vest of protection because I'm going to slaughter your principles. Right. Like, and I don't think he's not doing that. He's not targeting me. Right. He's not talking to me. And I'm not going to take it personally, just who he is. But I also think by him, just another way to say that is he's being himself. It feels less curated and more honest. And I like that. His son, like his children, wander into his YouTube channel sometimes.
Which is just when you're a parent, that is just what happens. Like you and your cat that wanders.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And this is live. His videos aren't, which means he had the opportunity to edit that out and he didn't. And I appreciate that honesty.
Now, here's I agree. Absolutely, honesty is good. However, I don't believe it is dishonest to be curated, because as long as what you're saying is actually what you intend to say, the fact that you want to make it efficient is a plus, and it's a boon of any sort of communication. I guess I'm going to veer into a little bit out of the gaming space and a little bit more of just communication space. But I find that in my case, eloquence tends to be effective, even though it's not always appealing. Some people do want the ramble. Some people actually want the extended verbose use of adjectives and that sort of thing. And that's absolutely great for certain situations and for certain people. However, it is not efficient. It is not a way to get a lot of things done in a limited amount of time. Agreed. Now, in the case of running a game, that means that you might be taking too long to change from one scene to another, or to change from one point of information to another, and you're literally losing daylight. And I don't know if this happens to you.
You're losing daylight and attention span.
Attention span is an interesting show. We'll touch on that in a moment, because I do want to. You know what? I'm actually going to pull out my little marker here and I'm going to write that down on my desk, which is an erasable desk, which is great. And
that is very cool. You need to send me a link on how, like, I want to see how big it is and that kind of thing, because that's a great idea. Before that's very cool.
And so I'm just little points that I just don't want to forget to touch on. And that is
the whole desk like that? Could you write on the legs that way?
The whole desk is a big whiteboard.
That's badass. Fantastic. Is that like something you bought, or is that a whiteboard you mounted to?
No. This is for sale. Like many things that you will find in my home, I bought it at Costco because they just have good stuff.
Costco shopper.
I know.
I'm just kidding. I'm just jealous we don't have Costco here.
No, I'm very fortunate that they carry all the stuff that I like. The point I was trying to make, though, is sometimes, and again, if anyone is watching and is interested in becoming a professional dungeon master, this is a consideration you might want to take.
Franco is the guy to ask. Don't talk to me about it. I won't talk to you about it. I'm just
not the point. No. I'm happy to take questions, but not the point. Is that sometimes you may run into people who become resentful of time wasting, because generally you set out a block of time, 4 hours, 3 hours, or whatever time to play a game, and a lot of players only think they are playing, which is weird, but either way, while they're rolling dice or their character is doing something. Even if some other player character is doing something, they sometimes feel cheated out of their time. Now, I have personally not encountered this a lot, because in my case, I run a in-person game. And so the other person who is speaking, the other player, is engaging everyone anyway. So everyone's part of the conversation at all times. However, I'm assuming, and you'll have to correct me on this one, that doing things remotely and virtually, that might be different. That might allow a lot more zoning out. And if it's the DM who is being extensive and being verbose about things, I don't know if that is something that will have your players lose not the interest in the session that they're playing, but interest in regaining and playing again with you. I don't know if that's something that
I'm the wrong guy to ask, because part of what I'm selling, right, part of what makes my tables what they are, is the inclusion of space, both literal time and like energy in the shared vibe for banter. We are going to talk. We're going to get off track. And after like anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes or whenever the first lull happens, whichever one of those things comes first, I'm going to say, hey, and we should roll some dice to try and get us back on track because that's my job.
It might be, we might be talking about different things. I'm not saying that inter party talk doesn't happen or other. I'm saying that when you as the GM in the game, not the banter, not the back, in the game, you are taking too long to deliver information. That's the time sink that I have seen.
Yes, those are two different things, but I'm still the wrong guy to talk about because I don't do verbose descriptions. My favorite example is the wood paneled study. I just explained it. That's it.
That's it.
Like, that's it. You enter a wood paneled study. I am trusting you, the player, to know what the fuck a wood paneled study is. That's it.
Fair enough.
You enter a fetid swamp. Done. Like that's all you get. Unless I am deliberately trying to draw your attention to or away from a specific thing, I probably won't describe that specific thing. Like if you enter a fetid swamp, your brain probably just filled up with rotten logs and plants that are, smell terrible and everything's wet and slick and gross. And I'm just going to assume that your brain did that. And then I'm going to stop talking because you as the players, if you have questions, you'll ask them, and then I will answer them. Because go ahead.
But I'm assuming then that you're of the structure of one adjective, one noun, that's it.
Basically, yeah. When I go more detailed than that, actually all the time, because that adjective needs to be attached to one of the human senses, preferably two. Like the word fetid includes both visual and smell.
Correct.
I think a lot of times we forget how things sound or taste. We don't use descriptions enough for those unless that sound is like, and somebody screamed. Yeah, but all things have noise. Also, the absence of noise. Like, how disturbing is the concept of a silent forest? Woods make noise all the time. Like, if you enter a woodland and it's quiet, something is very wrong.
Okay, so just in the conversation we're having right now, you actually did a couple of the things that I'm talking about that I find very appealing, which is that you went into the description of what you're using. In this case, the verbs you're using, the adjectives you're using, and the nouns and otherwise. Sometimes when delivering information for the game you're actually playing, you need to convey attitude. And this is when I think that the presentation style can make a difference. Because you can just say, they aggressively come towards you. Or you can say, you hear the stomping of their feet as if they wanted to crush the ground as they make their way towards you.
Sure.
See what I mean?
So you could also have them, you could also say, they towards you, which is what I usually do. Like, why
onomatopoeias are completely valid, for sure.
Right. Why use the word aggressive when you could just, at least for a second, be aggressive? Like,
every time someone says that, I get the song in my head. But either way, not the point.
Be aggressive. That one. Like,
anyway, not the point.
I don't know. I think that's a good point. In all seriousness, I think psychological connection, what just happened, let this thing attach to that thing, is a powerful tool at the table. I mean, that's what callback jokes need in order to exist.
True.
Like,
true. Absolutely true. Now, I guess the practical point here would be is how to distinguish when your players and when anyone in the table, because it might be you, the one that's playing and describing your own action, are into it and they're into the whole description and the whole thing and the extensive delivery of information, and when just to read, like, you know what, let's just move along with this one. Yeah, it's a fetish one. Run them some logs.
That's how you just look at them. That's it. If they look bored, speed up.
So, okay. So I am complete. So I'm just gonna clarify that what I might say is not intended to sound insensitive. I am a completely neurotypical person, which means that I
I find that
have
hard
this-
to believe personally.
It is totally true. Everyone says that they're a little, everyone likes to think that they're quirky and they're nuts, but I fully accept that I am the average of all human beings. I'm exactly the medical medium. I have no, exactly the right age for male pattern baldness. The whole thing.
Really? You really
Yeah,
don't?
yeah.
You seriously? You've been checked? You don't have any ADHD?
Not at all.
Seriously? I would have bet money
Yeah.
that you did. Huh.
No, I'm pretty neurotypical. Now
I have almost no neurotypical friends, so
I'm very exuberant and I am very much a showman, but that's a little bit more of a personality thing than a brain thing.
Mhm.
So what I can tell you is that even for someone who's neurotypical like I am,
Mhm.
sometimes reading the cues about people's attitudes is not easy. It's something
No.
that people it's not as automatic as people always think. And sometimes you will interpret, focused eyes as attention when they might be seething, burning anger. Like,
So how
hate what
you're
he is
right.
saying.
I just made that sound very simple and easy, and it's not. Well, okay, so simple and easy are not synonyms. I think it is simple. I don't think it's easy. Which is why I have a better time. Like when I sit down with a new group of players, I'm gonna have a harder time guessing correctly for the first 2 to 10 sit downs than I am after that, because after that, I have a baseline to work with, and I didn't when we sat down. So I keep notes. My notes in the beginning are filled with notes about the players, not their characters. I don't care about that stuff. They care about that stuff, and the stuff that they care about, they will bring up. So we'll keep moving forward with that stuff. Over time, though,
that's an
go ahead.
interesting point, because most game masters will keep extensive notes about the characters because that is what they base the stories off of.
Mhm.
Whereas in your case, you're telling me the character is less important because the player will bring up the important parts of the character if needed.
Right, the character is
I
less
got you.
important because if you want to rally up my friend John and get him to play his character like he's looking for vengeance and push John's buttons. And I realize that lots of people are going to watch this and be like, it's not okay to target your players. I'm not targeting John. I'm weaponizing John's own emotions for his enjoyment, not my puppet dancing. There's a difference there. Like, don't step in somebody's trauma, but you can find a button in most people that will get the reaction that not that you want for yourself, that you want for them. And you figure out where that line is by having a session 0 talk to them. If John doesn't want you to push his rage button, don't. Don't. But I bet you can find some other place. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that you can't target the players. You can and you should. You for the best visceral responses. You should. Just don't go too far and make sure you're doing it for them, not for you. More specifically, I guess, make sure you're doing it for you, for them. I suppose I should state that if I haven't already. For where my position in the table is that of service. So I'm there for them. If they're not having fun, neither am I. And if they're having fun, my design is like all I need to be having fun, with a couple of strong exceptions, like if they want to play a Nazi, pass. But for the most part, I don't care we play as long as they're having fun. Player wants to play a piece of cheesecake, done. We actually had that character. He was a sentient piece of cheesecake. It was a great time. And he became like the most stone cold serious character ever. Like when he died, we cried. Right? Like it was nuts. But that character was as fun as it was and committed as it was because it's what he wanted. And I think that's important. And if you don't push your players around a little bit to find where their lines are and to not cross them after that, of course, you might accidentally, like I had a table with 2 players. They're great. We played for like 2 years. And then we sat down and had one character played a sprightly woman from a little village with a sister. Dad chose the sister over her repeatedly. Religious cult situation. She ran away. Dad wanted Dad's approval, didn't get it, ran instead. Right. Got sick of not getting it. Said, you know what? I'm going to go live my own life. Fuck that guy. But never actually stopped wanting the approval. Right. Just stopped wanting to not get it anymore. Dad can't look at you with disappointment if he can't see you. So we'll go live in another town. Their adventures eventually bring them back to the town. Their idea, not mine. And then we played, I mean, I played the NPCs, right? That's my job. I played the dad and leaned into it. And that player cried all emotionally and invested in. I had to like pause and ask if I had made a terrible mistake. And the answer was no, they loved it, but I didn't know. Which means, one, I can't take credit for that moment because it was an accident. And two, I was freaking out about it because it was an accident. If I had known ahead of time, I would have done it anyway, but I would have known it was safe. And I think that knowledge comes from talking and pushing. Because sometimes people make it sound like you can just have a session 0 and talk to people and use safety tools and be done with it. But it's really not that simple. One, the presence of a safety tool is not enough. You have to actually like talk about it and not weaponize it and not be a jerk. And two, lots of people, when you ask them to talk about their trauma, even if they think they want to, they don't. They don't want to. It's pain. Nobody wants to talk about their pain. So in my experience, most people put a wall up immediately. People don't tell you the truth about their trauma, even when they want to, unless they've already had enough years of practice and training and probably therapy that safety tools are no longer required for those people. So instead, you get them talking about something else, and then you shut up and listen to them talk and take notes.
Absolutely. And you bring up, so it's a little bit off topic, but you bring up something that I do think is supremely important. Safety tools are only useful if not weaponized.
Correct.
And safety tools are only useful if you're really already in a safe environment, which means that they won't be weaponized. So, and this is something else that, again, was not the topic, but especially if you're a paid dungeon master or a paid game master of any type, if you find someone who is not willing to be considerate to the other players, especially if they don't know each other, there is no amount of revenue worth the horrible feeling of making someone else relive their trauma against them.
Agreed.
So this is, I'm giving everyone full permission to boot that person out of your table.
Oh yeah.
Immediately. As in, even you running the table, no matter how much money you get paid for it, are going to feel horrible just because you saw it happen and you allowed it. So if anyone watching is ever considering being a paid GM, there's no amount of money. There's no amount of money worth seeing that sort of thing happen. So just
all my tables are great. And how I did that was say I got 4 players that are all said, yeah, let's have a session 1. First, we have a session 0. They don't pay for that, which is us talking about the characters and the back design and all that stuff. And then we have session 1, which is actual play. We're going to roll dice. You might even level up depending on what we're playing. Who knows? You didn't pay for that either. Then you pay after that. If you want session 2 at the end of session 2, there you go. Before I've had people say, well, doesn't that mean that people could just take those 2 sessions from you with no intention to pay you? Yes, and it has happened, and I'll get over it. My professionalism is worth that loss to me.
Not only that is a very good filter, because you actually want people who come in with that attitude, with that. You actually don't want them as continual clients.
No.
Regardless of what you're selling, by the way. This is something that has nothing to do with being a professional GM or anything like that. It has something to do with being in business. There are such things as clients you don't want, bad clients. And for the particular service that we're talking about here, that is one of them. People who want to take advantage of the pricing system are not people who want to play the game. They're people who want, so absolutely, definitely worth the loss.
So say we get to the end of session 2 and these 4 players are like, yeah, we're getting along with each other. We're getting along with you. Sure. Let's move forward, at least for now. Sounds great. 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 sessions in. Now we're bonded as a unit, right? We're closer to friends than we were 10 sessions ago when we met on the internet, and we were just people. Most of the tables I have, I've eventually become friends with those people, and I like that about me. It's part of why I love my job. And some of those players have changed a lot in like 2 or 3 years. It's wild to watch people emotionally grow. It's awesome. Anyway,
it definitely is.
So you have those 4 players, and then a 5th guy wants to join. I say, okay, that's it. Then we sit down, we play. After we play, I ask the group breaks for the day. So we're not all in the same room anymore. Whether we play in person or online, it doesn't matter. I'm going to wait till there's a moment where I have those 4, and not the fifth new guy. And I'm going to ask them to tell me whether or not they want to keep him. They don't have to offer up an explanation, and they don't have to say right now. They can reach out privately if they want. I would even encourage it, because social pressure is a thing, even from your friends, maybe especially from your friends. So like alternative vote, you all got to vote. If more votes, then yeah. If more votes said no, then yes, he doesn't come back next week. There's no description. There's no explanation. I just tell him. That's it. Because you might sit down with a bunch of people and be like, wow, I really want to like playing with you. But now that I've actually done it, I don't. And I can't put my finger on it. Maybe you breathe too loud. Maybe I really couldn't tell you why. Your personality at the table is different than it is when we're just talking. And dice you, I don't like. And I couldn't tell you why. Maybe it's clear. You're a jerk. Maybe it's not. You don't have to explain it. Part of not weaponizing a safety tool is using a safety tool where they don't have to say what it is that's bothering them. People shouldn't have to explain their pain for you to make space for it.
Absolutely agreed. Now,
so the short version of that, go ahead.
I've never had that situation because, again, I play in person and I'm paid by a company, not by the players. So I show up and so just like anything else, I am the entertainment paid by the venue.
Right.
So in my case, I don't have that. Hey, we can't accept that other person because they're coming in. I can.
What is on your hand? It's been driving me nuts.
Oh, this?
Yes, that.
This is so that when you pick up something that you're going to eat, you don't get your fingers all crunching, so I can keep on typing.
Oh, look at you with your fancy. That's fancy. The short version of that is that the players who I already have vet the new player.
No, and that's a very good way to go.
Thank you.
Now, here's and this is going to sound super weird because it's going to sound like I'm forcing it back to the topic, but I promise you it's not. How you present that option also is what makes it appealing or not, is what makes people say, hey, you know, I can actually say it. I don't want this guy back, or I do. Whereas if I let's say that I am a GM and I come up, you know, after that session and the fifth guy is already not available for whatever reason. Hey, you four, like, so we're keeping that guy, right? Because I want the revenue.
Right.
That is a terrible way to present that.
Right. Yeah, right. We're keeping that guy right as a leading question, right? You instead you say, what do you think? That's it. And if they take 5 minutes to get back to you, you don't say anything. And if it takes them 2 days to get back to you, let's say that table plays weekly, they have until the next table to get back to you. You don't rush them. You don't poke them. If it's 12 hours before the next session, you still don't fucking say anything. You just let them do their thing. They have lives. And chances are, if I ask them, so what do you think of player X? I am just assuming that they can understand that I probably need, if they didn't like him, they have a vested interest in telling me that before they are forced to play with him again because they didn't say anything. If they care that much, they will say something. You can trust that they'll get around to it.
Like, it might be 5 minutes before the next session, but they will.
It might be. Yeah, it might be. And I sometimes that is inconvenient for me as the guy on the other of the table. No arguments here. Sometimes it's inconvenient and sometimes it's stressful. And my play groups are great because I put up with that. Like, I get over it for how cool they are. So presentation, I think, is super important. I didn't mean to walk away from that. Presentation is a big deal. For me, I think that was the biggest part of how I set up an ad. I really don't. I respond to other people. But when I do that, like my price model, I wanted it to be, I was thinking about it. I went paid D&D and stuff like that is a relatively new job. I mean, some like the factory worker is hundreds of years old, right? The paid D&D guy is not. And there's a certain degree of stigma that comes with that. So I wanted the transition to be as smooth as possible. That's why it's an hourly rate. Two things there. One, everyone you know knows what it's like to have an hourly rate. You don't have to explain it. And two, there's no incentive there for me to have more players at the table. There is more incentive for them to have more players at the table, much in the same that if you split, it's easier to split rent if you have more people living in the apartment with you. I charge hourly, not per seat. So if there are 4 people and they, assuming an even split, it costs them each more money than it would if there were 6 people, say.
Now, you touched on a couple of things that I need to start writing more of this down. All right. One, you mentioned there's a stigma with being a
Paid GM. I run into that all the time. Yeah.
I've seen a little bit of that, but mostly as thought experiments. I've seen it like in a couple of forums and a couple of Facebook posts I've been here and there, but I haven't seen a big push against it. Like no one has ever said, I'd love to, but not paid.
Really? Yeah, that happens. I see that happen all the time. I see people go, oh yeah, no. Everything from, I don't get why you would charge for it. I'm not looking for a paid game, and I don't think that's a negative. I just think that's what somebody is and is not looking for. That's fine. It's a binary state, not an emotional one. There's also stuff like you parasitic slime. Like, which is a fairly negative statement, you know. Like, that's a pretty strong statement.
So what
the one that rubs me the wrong way, the one that's always the hardest for me to ignore is, and I do my best to do it anyway, because can't believe I'm going to say this. Haters going to hate. There, I said it. It's true. So I try not to engage with such nonsense. But the one that is the hardest for me to walk away from is, I want somebody who's doing it for the love of the thing, not somebody who's doing it for money. The implication being that since you're charging, you don't care as much. You're less invested. That is horse shit.
Absolutely. The same could be said of anything that provides you with a living wage.
Right. I want the mason that's doing it for the love of the stonework, not the one I'm gonna have to pay. Right, that's ridiculous. No, like that was always the hardest for me to walk away from, because it strikes me as the most asinine thing. Like it's the helliest version of a negative response. But I do my best to walk away from those two.
Now I've never faced any of that, because believe it or not, I am very lucky. I don't think I'm particularly anything other than that. Someone has to be the luckiest guy in the world. I might be up there, because every time that I have brought it up,
I don't know. You're not dating my wife, right?
Either way, no. Just to confirm, no, I'm not. But
I'm pretty sure I'm luckier than you, because I have Amber and you don't.
I don't know, man. I've got Anna, and you know Anna, so
Anna's pretty cool. Yeah, that's fair. Anna's pretty cool.
But the point I was trying to make is that and this might be a matter of sheer luck. It's not something that it's a merit of mine. But I am a neurotypical straight white man between the age of 30 and 45
and 40.
That's so I am very hard to suppress, to be suppressed. So I do have, that is just luck of the draw. I didn't choose any of this. This is just how I am.
Hold on, you didn't choose to be white? What?
Believe it or not. I know. So I've had the absolute good fortune that every time that I've mentioned that, hey, what do you do for fun? I purposely mentioned like, hey, you know what? Right now, the thing that I'm super passionate about, because it's a new thing for me and something I'm putting a lot of time into, is I am running Dungeons and Dragons games at a distillery as a paid dungeon master. And every time I've said that out loud, I have either been there's follow-up questions. There's like, oh wow, like I didn't know that was a thing. There's a lot of positive reaction. Now, bear in mind, it is very possible that the positive reaction isn't because of what I'm telling them about. It is because probably that I don't appear to be outside of the social norm. And again, that is very much a matter of presentation. When I say these things, I'm generally in a suit and tie at a networking event for a business thing, which is my actual day job. And so when people ask you like, hey, what do you do? It's just like those common, oh, is the cat running through there?
Yeah, there was the cat. Yeah. Mom, you all right?
She landed on my head.
Oh no.
First.
The cat just flew off a shelf and kicked my mom in the head on the way down.
Okay.
She appears to be okay.
Well, she got the spot that's already
Oh.
up and waiting, so.
Are they? I hope they're both okay.
Yeah, they're all right.
Pretty much.
We should finish presentation, but I
Sorry.
before I forget, a player specifically asked me to talk about how to play a paladin without being a jerk, and I wanted to make sure we did that.
Super. All right. So super good. And this is a matter of presentation because you're going to take the same actions as the character, but you might want to present them differently as the character than how you present them as the player.
Mhm.
So I have to, and it kind of leans into this very, very well. When you're playing a character who is going to do something, or who needs who by character design is going to need to do something that's going to antagonize another character, you would be wise to talk to the other player about what's going to happen.
Agreed.
Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to do the thing. But let's say, for example, I'm playing the paladin, and Jay, you are playing the rogue in this case. I'm assuming
Okay.
because that's the most common stereotypical conflict.
Sure.
And I have been, you do something that it is completely against my oath to tolerate, and so I will say like, hey Jay, this I would approach it with the same joy that I would approach the actual play, which is like, hey Jay, what your character just did, that's super cool because now my character has to have this like internal conflict. Does he go with his oath? Does he not go with his oath? Like, what would happen if like my paladin just said like, you know what, has this epiphany moment and says, he might be my best friend, but he is, and then insert oath reason here.
Right.
And then you and I, the players, can go like, oh no, that moment would be like, it would be better if it were this way, that way. And then we can actually plan we can talk about what the characters would be doing outside of the actual play. And then when we actually are playing, we already know the conflict. We already know what the tension's about. We've already discussed that these are going to be in opposition. And then the dice will do what they do. And then we'll go with that. So I'm a strong advocate of the characters do not have to have the same attitude than the players. Right now, I'm actually playing a game with my friend Phil, great guy, in which I am a tiefling. I'm a tiefling warlock,
Mhm.
and there is a paladin who is straight up, stereotypical paladin, but the player plays him so comically well, and so every time, so my character hates his character, like hates him absolutely, because the paladin patronizes so the paladin is convinced that his god sent my character to him as his squire.
Okay.
Which is fantastic. And obviously my character resents that terribly and does everything possible to undermine that sense of authority. But above the table, like at the players, when we have like a break for get some chips or whatever it is, I'm like, dude, my character is totally gonna do this, and like he's like, this is the time. He's gonna wait for you to do this thing and that's when he's gonna strike. Like I hope the dice are in your favor, and he'll have a laugh, and we'll play through it, because he knows that even though in this case I'm the one doing something to him because he's the paladin, at some point his character is gonna do something to mine because it's part of the dynamic. So if you're going to play a paladin or any character that's going to antagonize another player character, involve the player in that antagonistic play, because you both get to have fun with whatever the characters are doing, and you get to talk about it above table. So that is the suggestion that I would make. It doesn't matter if you're a paladin, it doesn't matter who you are. If your character is going to be antagonizing another player character, involve that player in that dynamic.
Definitely. I tend to, the simplest version of that, I think, is PvP. I tend to, only because when player, the scenario you just described, I most of the tables I have, I'm lucky enough that telling the players that they can do that doesn't have to come up. They just do it. They're like loving it enough that they just say, hey, look, da da da, and they start talking. So I only see the result because I'm not part of that conversation. I don't have to be. So I'm usually only see the result. I only know they talk to each other about behind the table, away from the table, because they tell me sometimes. Or I'll hear them say, player A says to player B, hey, you want to hop on 20 minutes while we're wrapping up on Tuesday? I'll hear them say, hey, you want to hop on 20 minutes early next Tuesday to talk.
Yeah.
And I hear that, but it's none of my business. So I don't say, yeah, that's a good idea. I just go, yeah, see you next week, and we're done. So I know that's happening. And sometimes it's like one day they all got together for one table is 4 players, and they spoke on Discord for an hour after we'd had a particularly emotionally intense session, and I was very concerned that they were firing me. Right, like I was freaking the hell out. It was, as it turns out, they loved it, and they were like talking about meeting up in person to have like lunch or whatever. It wasn't table related at all. But I didn't know that, you know.
Well, you say it wasn't table related, but think of
Where
how...
you eat dinner. Yeah, I know. that's not
Touche, good one. No, yeah, you got me. No, but think of how you actually become friends with people. It is through the slow but deliberate exploration of the other person's feelings.
Oh yeah.
And so whenever you have a very emotional session, which is what sounds like happened there, that means that they got to explore how they express their feelings, because inevitably that comes through. And what, at least my interpretation is that they became comfortable enough, like, hey, you know, you want to hang out in real life? Like, well, not really. You want to hang out as, you know, not.
I had a table invite Amber and I to their wedding, which was wonderful. We couldn't go; it's too far away. But they sent us an invite anyway. It's on my fridge. It's wonderful. And
that's exactly
that's a different situation than, I mean, those are different people. They're the same people, but our connection is different than when we met, right?
Oh, for sure.
Day one, let's call her player A. Day one, player A would have never done that. That's a deeply personal thing, of course not.
Yeah.
But now it's been years, and should they do like a renew vows thing, I'm gonna see if we can't figure out a way to go, because it's been like a year, and I'm still kind of sad we didn't get to go. We had other stuff to do, and it was far away. But
I mean, I'm not saying that I'm going to plug something here, but you do know that I'm an ordained minister and can do that, right? Anyway,
I actually didn't. That's very cool.
Yeah, I did my first wedding a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they're very. I didn't charge them a penny. I met them at the courthouse when I was picking up the information about what I needed to do to get some people married, and they were picking up the information of what they needed to get married. So
and this
it just worked out.
Well,
like, you know what? We're gonna do it. But yeah, for sure.
Cool.
But either way, and you know, again, ties into the whole thing. How you come across, how you present things yourself, but the information mostly off, is definitely gonna play on how it's received and how much banter of it. Think of it, the person who answers with just yes and no answers instead of actually going into things. My wife often criticizes me of this. She asked me, we were on vacation this past week, which is why we didn't do this. And we were in Niagara Falls, and there's a place that has the word love written with some chain link, and then people will put locks onto it, just like, you know, the bridges and that sort of thing. And so we were passing by a vendor who actually just for that sold locks. And my wife was like, hey, do you want to buy a lock and put it on the wall? And I answered, no. and the friends that we were with, they all were like, oh no, dude, that's the wrong answer. You absolutely want to do it. And then we had a good laugh of it, and we did the thing, took the pictures. But if you don't present what you want, you will get the answer of what you asked. And that's the same thing when you're presenting as a dungeon master. If you want a response, a visceral response to your monster, something that's actually terrifying, if you just say, all right, so a dragon comes up and starts to attack you, that's not going to get them the holy cow, we're gonna die situation here. Whereas if you describe the hair on the back of your neck starts to stand up as you have this eerie feeling of being observed, while a hot breath that seems to be right next to your ear, but when you turn, you can see it's almost 5 feet away, simply says, I see you. As you can feel it inhale, about to release a bout of fire. Roll initiative.
Oh, you had me till you said roll initiative.
Oh, well, okay. Let me just clear up. I am 100% Dungeons and Dragons on this one, but that's because that's the way we go. But did you did you feel the difference there?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So again, how you present that information. So if anything,
I definitely think so. The single greatest book that impacted my ability to describe combat. Well, I'm not recommending the book for reading and personal consumption. I think he does better work. But for sheer like combat, this book will change how you describe combat. You're not paying me to say that, of course not. He's been dead for decades. It's just really, really, really great for combat description. Says the guy who just said really like 4 times.
I actually, per your recommendation, I got the full collection in audiobooks, and absolutely have to agree. The stories were not to my taste, but
I
the
think,
descriptions, fantastic.
Yeah. So Howard's history's greatest crime to Howard is it remembers him as a sexist pig when he wasn't. Its second greatest crime to Howard is that he is most well known for Conan, which is a big disappointment. It's not only does he do substantially better work, he does better barbarians. Like Conan, I would put Conan somewhere near the bottom of Howard's written body of work, even within the sword and sorcery category.
But
However,
it was popular.
His description is really, really great. Of everything except women, where he's really only got the 2 words, supple and lithe. That's it. and he, like, Queen Ballad of the Black Coast is particularly badass when he uses the word supple and lithe twice each in the same paragraph to describe her, because that's really all he's got. But the rest of it is really, really great. It's a great shame that there is something like several 100% more Conan than there is Cull.
Well, now that you brought it up,
Cull wonders and Conan doesn't.
Now that you brought it up, I think this would be a good time to actually say, well, how can you get better at this? One, you already gave us a little bit of a tip there, which is read something that presents in a way that's interesting, so that you actually have a reference. Like, well, why was I interested in this? Why did it captivate me? Have a reference.
I dislike in an individual combat description. The thing that's going to turn me off the most is the use of the word miss. Don't do that. If you attack, if you swing it, if a goblin swings at you with his hand axe and he misses, don't say that. Say you definitely dodge out of the way. Say his energy gets the better of him and he swings at the mud in front of you. If an ogre misses you, don't say that. Say you put your shield up and you feel the impact in your arm, but you parry through. Don't say miss. Like, because nobody who's ever actually been in a fight looks at it like that. They look at it like, oh man, I'm glad that missed. Like, it's never just oh, okay, he missed. That's nice. It's not like that.
Oh no. Not even the best martial artist in the world dodges everyone and like, oh, they
right. Yeah, right. If and in combat, like the offense is the same way. Hit's lazy. You can go too far with it. If you individual descriptions can be too long, sure, but there's also, if there's only so many ways to say I swung a sword or an axe or I fired an arrow. And after a certain point, if the fight is still happening and you feel like you've already said this description before and you don't have any more, don't struggle, stop. Just say you hit or miss at that point. What I think you've done now is made of combat that is too long. If your vocabulary is large enough for you to essentially use synonyms to describe the same situation more than once, and your ability to do it has run out anyway, that's because the fight is too long, not because you failed.
Ooh,
like no combat should be longer than 10 rounds, ever. Like,
oh, then 10 rounds. Yeah, no, for sure.
No one has that kind of attention span, and people who do want to use it on other shit. Speed up. Like, I don't have time for that. Nobody does.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna just say, if you hit 10 rounds, it's a long combat. If you hit 15 rounds, someone needs to immediately die, and this has to end.
Or give up. People do this thing where they have their monsters or bandits or whatever fight to the death all the time.
Oh, no.
That's insane. And most living things wish to remain living. I cannot think of a bandit that I've seen in TV that I found believable, or a real world historical bandit who thought any amount of money was worth dying over. Not maybe dying over. Lots of people do that. But when they're faced with what they are confident is death, not let's go into the tomb and I might die, I am holding this treasure chest and the boulder is coming after me. And if I don't let go, I am going to die.
Oh yeah, no.
They're gonna let go. They always do, because nothing, very, very little is worth dying over.
All right. Well, then I agree with you entirely, and we may have different approaches to it, but I agree. How do you present that in a way that's not anticlimactic or disappointing for the player who just
The bandit says,
like,
"Whoa,
wants
whoa,
to kill him."
whoa." Right. Once a player, say, party of adventurers goes 4 guys, get attacked by 6 bandits who will almost certainly outnumber them and will attack them at some sort of advantage by night, from above, whatever, because bandits they don't have martial training, not like fighters do, and they know it. That's how you make them believable. You make them not fight fair. They throw dirt. They attack at night. They try and sneak up on behind you, yada, yada, yada. But the smart bandits know that they need an advantage to win, in the same way that kobolds attack you at 3-to-1 odds. Literally, 3 of them for every 1 of you. Once you've cut down half of that, kobolds run away because they know they can't beat you 1-to-1. They know it. If they didn't know it, some other creature would have wiped them out by now. And clearly that hasn't happened. I don't mean this group. I mean kobolds evolutionally would not exist if they weren't smart enough to stay alive.
Agreed.
So the bandits, once the bandits jump you and you beat them anyway, they might fight for a round or 2. That depends on how high their wisdom score is. If their wisdom score is high, that means they know when the point of no return is before it's too late. If their wisdom score is low, they don't. But they're going to figure it out before they're dead. One of them is, anyway. When that bandit figures out that he cannot win, he's going to decide in this moment whether or not he attempts to run away, or whether or not he hits his knees and goes, "Oh, whoa, 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 whoa." And then he's actually literally going to say, "This isn't worth dying over. What am I going to do to stay alive?" You've just handed all the power to the players that they already had, but you've doubled down on it. You avoid disappointment.
I like that.
What do I got to do for you to not kill me? Is the most powerful statement ever spoken in a fantasy setting. Like, you can have literally anything that can talk, say it too. Like, so I mean,
I like that approach, because I gotta tell you, when I had my my enemies leave the combat, the solution I found is not always practical, is that they leave with something that the players want. So that it seems plausible that what they want to do is get away with something instead of just get away with their lives. But again, you don't always have that. You don't always have something available that, like, oh, like he'll kidnap the kid, or he'll, like, whatever it is. But your way is to actually face them and do the thing like, whoa, it's not worth dying over.
Right, like, look, because now you have an opportunity to introduce quest lines and exposition and other stuff. And if the players just kill them, fine. That was their choice to make. But if you didn't say, whoa, I don't want to die, they were going to kill them anyway. So now you've given them players more agency than they had a minute ago.
What? And you know what? This is just a question that I've struggled with. How do you then handle interrogations? Because they don't have to be aggressive interrogations. By the way, let me just be clear.
What do you mean? How do I handle interrogations?
As in, how do you handle the information that you're providing? So let's say that the bandit says, this is not worth dying over, and so smartly the players surround him or her, doesn't matter, and it's obviously this character is captured. Eventually, they're going to ask him things like, well, they didn't kill him and they're not just going to like, oh, well, then go away.
Who sent you? What were you after? Yada, yada, yada.
They're going to keep him, if not at least for a conversation.
Right.
How do you dispense that information, or whatever, these quest lines or these new pieces of lore through that interaction? Because it also has to be satisfying. It can't be something like, oh, well, he tells you, and now you know this. You know what I mean?
Why can't it? It's already satisfying. The players handed that bandit his ass so decidedly that he thought it was better to cry like a little kid than it was to, run away or fight. They literally stripped the will out of a person. That's not satisfying enough for you. Like,
I don't know. So
It's
there
satisfying
are-
enough for me and most players, in my opinion, in my experience, rather. So here's how that usually works. Paul and Peter, I don't have a table called Paul and Peter, but let's say I did. Paul and Peter capture a bandit. They threaten him. They capture a bandit because he attacked them 6-1 because there are 2 of them. And so 6 bandits. The 6 bandits got their butts kicked. Now it's just this one bandit. And they say, hey, why are you attacking us? And he says, well, because have you seen your sword? It glows. Seemed like an easy win. Did it? There were 6 of you. Were you all traveling as a group of 6 guys all at once, and you happened to see the glowy sword and didn't think you saw easy loot, not easy way to die? I don't believe you. Try again. Because I've had that exact conversation with players. I tried that defense, and they went, no. There were 6 of you. We have a fiery sword. That's true. If you actually saw the fiery sword and went, easy win, not great way to get me killed, you're not useful. Try again. And the bandit tried again, and he went, oh, all right. Look, I can see that you're men of action, right? I'm a man of action, right? You want more action than I do. I get that. I'll tell you what, you get more action and I get not dead. And then they go, well, yeah, all right, sure. What can you tell us? And they go, well, so the truth of it is that the reason there were 6 of us is because we got hired by this guy. And they go, what guy? And I go, I don't know, creepy fella, didn't see his face. Well, but I can tell you where we found him. And having a bandit pre-flinch before the players say anything to them does an awful lot to put the players back in a position of psychological power, even if they thought I was fucking with them. It works really well.
Like
Have the bandit go back because he just assumes they're going to hit him. Like,
that is actually very clever, and it's very realistic. I don't know if it's realistic or not, because I've never been in this situation, but it's very believable. It is very believable. I don't like that, and
you don't have to tell him everything because he's a bandit. No intelligent mastermind would trust a bandit with all the
whole
details.
plan,
right? Yeah,
no way.
And if he does, if that bandit can tell that party everything, you've just ruined that bad guy, or you've done exactly what you wanted to do. If what you wanted to do was paint that nemesis as an idiot, right? Like, because no smart mastermind would share all of his details with the hired thug that he's been like. He said, here's 20 gold, go kill that character.
The rest of the plan is way above the pay grade for that band.
Right. And if the players then go, well, wait a second. If the mastermind hired you and it's pretty clear you weren't going to win, like, then why did he bother? He did pay you real money, right? And the bandit goes, yeah, here you go. Here's the 50 gold. Take it. Your players go, some guy spent 50 gold to get us attacked. For what? Did he see it? If he didn't see the fight, then he might think that bandit just made off with the 50 gold. If I'm a smart thug, if I'm a smart mastermind, presumably then I'm smart enough to make sure that you don't just run off with my 50 gold. So maybe you're being watched. And a player might say, hey, can I make an investigation check right now to see if I'm being spied on or something? If it doesn't matter what they ask, whatever they ask is more psychological buy-in than you had if they just killed the bandit. And all you had to do to go from just kill the bandit to them going, smells like a setup, to get a little bit more psychological buy-in, is have the bandit go, I don't want to die. And that's it.
I like that. It had never occurred to me to do it that way. For me, it was just a mechanical, they're leaving, and how do you run the
I've done that too. But if the bandits get away, most players I end up with have some sort of movement ability where you'll have to come up with an excuse. How come the bandits ran away faster than they can chase them with magic or a horse or something? And you can only do the portal stone so many times before your players look at you like you're phoning that shit in, and we can't have that. So if the bandits not only get away, but they get away with something that belongs to the party, unless that something was deeply important to them, and you give them a way to follow up on it, it usually doesn't feel as good for me as just, I don't want to die, I'll hand you the exposition. And usually whatever I got paid to kill you in the first place.
That's a bad deal for that bandit, but at least
It is. He's a bandit. He's he's a social fragment. Right. And later on, like that same player, that same table with those two guys, like session 2, they come under attack by what every time they called him a pirate, he went, "Excuse me, aquatic merchant." For like a 2-hour interrogation. he would temporarily redevelop a spine just long enough to go, "Excuse me, aquatic merchant. I'm not a pirate.
You may have broken all of my fingers, aquatic merchant."
Right. But you cannot break my pride, sir. Aquatic merchant. Right. After a 4-hour session, at the end of that 4-hour session, he has fled. They let him go. They gave him all the he gave him all the information he had, and like promised to turn over a new leaf, and they didn't buy that last part, of course not, but they don't actually care. He can't hurt them, and they're not worried about it, so they cut him loose. 2 sessions later, they end up in another town far away. He is in it, and he is in good with the ruler there, and they go, "Oh my God, we're going to kill this pirate." And I said, "Did you say that out loud?" And one of them said, "Yes." And he says, "Aquatic merchant," and we made a whole thing out of it. And he did turn over a new leaf, and it's taken them like 6 months to accept that. Which struck me as odd because it's what they demanded of him for his life, and then believed he didn't do it. And when he did it, they were like, "We don't believe you."
Incredulous adventurers, how dare thee.
And then they spent like 2 weeks trying to figure out how the hell he beat them to this location. It was far away. And they have like giant Gundam mechs. They're like, how on earth did he get here first? And so much faster that he had time to like get in good with the local royalty. You don't show up on Monday and be close bonds with the king on Tuesday.
Oh yeah, no.
But that takes time. How the hell did he get here first? Like, and he goes, "Well, and then I pulled story stuff out of my butt."
Like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, yeah.
But I mean, none of that, all of that was possible just because I had him act like a worm, and he's a bandit. He is a worm.
So you gotta tell you the truth. I had not seen it that way. So, like I said before, and for whoever's listening, this is not new. I run adventures based on a story that I already know what happens if the players do nothing. So it never occurred to me that sometimes it's not if the players do nothing. Sometimes what happens if what the players do makes someone else who's also potentially not part of the original story also do something different. And that's a little bit more brain work for sure, but it seems to be worthwhile, and I like your approach to it. I think it's really, really good.
Hey, thanks.
All right. Last, before we close off, because we're getting close to the hour, you did, and I have it in here. So attention span.
Yeah.
So how you present information also not only has to be appealing, it has to be attention grabbing, but also it has to be suited for the attention span, dedicated to the situation. Because I do believe that anyone will pay attention long enough to get the thing that they're interested in.
Agree.
So
I do think there's an upper limit on that, but I think
sure.
you get a stunningly longer rope than lots of people think.
Correct.
For them to get the thing they want. Like I started on, I think it's Evil West. It's a video game the other day.
Sure.
And I turned it on for the first time. It's a tactical Western. You play a guy with a 6-shooter. I'm up against other guys with 6-shooters in like, it's a ratty cabin. There's a hangman's tree outside, right? And I was like, I like the art style and this is well done and all, but I know that mechanic there is kind of cool and I haven't seen it in some other RTS, but this is not enough to get me to play a 20-hour game. Speed up, do something interesting. And then at the end of that level, so you're fighting these men because they kidnapped your wife. Again, not impressed. I've read that story already, right? And then you kill those guys, which you can only do through the use of the cover system because you're outnumbered. If you just stand there, you're gonna die because they all have the same guns you do. So the game has a well-made tutorial for how you get the advantage when you wouldn't otherwise have it. Somewhere you bounce back and forth between their luck system and their cover system, two in-game mechanics that are unique, so as far as I know, to that game. When you get to the end, your wife is dead. Of course she is. Duh, I could have told you that. Oh, spoilers for a couple of years old game now and the tutorial level. Your wife didn't make it.
And the tutorial level.
Right. What I can tell you that I thought was interesting was that her head is like missing or whatever. And there's a note to what appears to be Satan. Like, and like there's a shadowy burp and it like eats up the coffin she was in. So it isn't just a madman. That's meh. But there was like a hellfire belch and the building was lost except for you. That's
Wow.
interesting. Where the hell did that come from? Like, so I'll play the next level. But if you hadn't, and I played the next one and the next one, and I was like, okay, you do need to get around to giving me the more hellfire by like level 5. But I got to the end of level 1, almost to the end, and went, meh. And then you got 4 more levels out of me just because you're interesting for 20 seconds. Like,
Okay.
and I'm a
So,
pretty harsh judge. So if that'll work on me, yeah, I think you get a lot more rope out of other people.
so I think you're making a valid observation here, which is that you don't have to be interesting the whole time.
No, you don't. You
You
just
just
need to
have to-
provide breadcrumbs that appeal to the breadcrumb eater.
Mhm. Which for someone like me is a bit complicated because I just like putting on literally a spectacle.
Mhm.
So it's just part of how my personality on it. But I also have found that it's a bit tiring. Not tiring as in it's not not mentally exhausting. I'm exhilarated by it, but I end up being very animated. As I've said before, I don't use the DM screen. I walk around the table as I DM and I describe things and the whole thing. I don't stay. It's just how I am. But I find myself that I get home and like I carry all my stuff back and like, oh man, I'm tired. Why? All I was doing is talking, and then I find like I mentally review. I'm like, oh no, I was like running up and down the whole time, and it was engaging. My players were very much participating in the whole thing, but there might be a more effective way to just the attention curve does not have to be a continual spike. It can be a wave. And I think that that's something that also requires a little bit of practice, but you need to understand it. And I believe that's why I'm going to kind of touch on this, because once you pick up on the fact that attention to be held does not need to be held continually, it just needs to be tugged on every now and then, it's a good thing to know when you want to guide people and when you want to guide players through a scenario, or when you want to guide people through information. So just as a side on that one, I do believe that a good refresher on just public speaking would be a good one, because and I'm not advertising any particular, but most public speaking advice that you can find either on YouTube for free or otherwise will tell you that you cannot be 100% all the time. You have to
you have to go up and down.
You have to actually
that was my problem with the second Avengers movie. There's no break. There isn't one. The whole thing is up all the time for 2 hours, which is
and that also will break people's attention.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The only exception there, and I think it's only for me, and like a couple of other people probably, but for me, it's a very notable exception, is if you make an 80s action movie, I want enough plot spent to know who the good guy is, who the bad guy is, and why I should think good guy, bad guy about each one. Like, who am I rooting for and how come? That's it. Now I want 2 hours of explosions and ass whooping. That's it. Actually, I want an hour and a half. Like, but with the exception of that movie, like for me, The Raid 2 is the perfect action movie, because The Raid 2 assumes that you've seen The Raid 1 and therefore offers you no exposition whatsoever on who the good guy and the bad guys are. And it's an hour and a half of well done, minimal cuts, unlike lots of modern movies that have more cuts than a barbershop. What the hell are you doing? In just incredible, like that movie is awesome. Like it is fantastic.
What's the name again?
The Raid. Well, specifically The Raid 2. We're about to get a new Raid movie made by not the guy who made the first two, and I have doubts.
Okay.
But I think attention span is a big deal. Like we just watched, my wife and I watched Endgame for the first time yesterday. I know, super late to the party. Knock me later. We watched Endgame. It was 3 hours. It's too long. It's way too long. It's also a great example of why catharsis is not enough to carry a film. Like Endgame is a good movie, sure. And the catharsis returned there. When the portals open and Captain America's facing down an entire army by himself with a broken shield and he doesn't stay down and he gets the hammer anyway. That's the power of a comic book. That was badass. And then 1,000 people, literally half of all that lives, show up to back him up for the lives they lost 5 years ago. And now they remember that, which has got to be really like therapy inducing. And here's a better world that they only get to have if they come together. That's cool. That's the kind of upgraded society that I think comics are for. That's awesome. And it's super, super cathartic. But in order for that movie to work as well as it did, you had to watch almost all of the movies before it. Wow, is that a huge time commitment for 1 3-hour film? Holy crap. I argue that something weird happened on the way to Thor's hammer is just as good, if not better, and is literally 4 minutes long. That is a 4-minute film, and for my money is the best Marvel movie to date. What music is present is excellent. Brief, but excellent. The main character is likable. The victim NPC, whatever, is there long enough to be the victim and then not take away from the action. The bad guys are just unlikable enough to definitely be the unlikable bad guys, and the action is perfect. It's a brilliant movie. It does everything you want in a badass action movie in 4 minutes. Like, while Endgame might be better, it might do more. I don't think proportionally it does more in its 3 hours than that movie does in its 4 minutes. Like,
okay, I'm gonna need to.
It's a
rewatch
great
this
movie.
with the different, see it through different eyes, I guess.
And while Captain America, particularly Captain America in Endgame, does some badass things, and Thor's like, I knew it moment is very cool and shows great growth for Thor as a character. Because movie 1 Thor would have never been okay with Steve taking his hammer like that. He would have lost his mind over it. And in this time, he's not just okay with it, but he celebrates him for it. There's a moment right after that where he has the axe and Cap has Thor says, no, you take the small one. I'll take the axe. Again, a big growth moment for Thor. Thor 1 would have lost his wig over that. He would have never made that decision. And that's really cool. But that only works as anything other than a comic one-liner, not Thor's growth as a character, because you saw 3 movies before that were each 2 hours long. Holy crap. Like that, I don't think that's worth it. I don't think it's worth it. So the main character of Something Happened in Thor's Hammer is Phil Coulson. You should see that. It's, for my money, he is just as badass in 4 minutes as Captain America is in 3 hours with 2 incredible weapons. Like, it's a great movie.
I agree. No, I do believe that there's, and again, it comes down a little bit to storytelling and pacing, which is not afforded to a game master as much as I sometimes wish it were.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, you have to be cognizant of these little details about how to present the information, how much attention to pull at a time, how to pace the up and down of interest. And that's why I put it in there. It kind of all ties in together. And if I had a recommendation for anyone who's planning on being a game master, professional or otherwise, if you just want to tell a good story that has interaction with it, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons or any other system or otherwise, you need to understand that the way you present the information matters. It's not just here you go. Oh
yeah. So I had an example of that very thing. Whenever I talk to my players, for example, I try not to call them my players. They're not. There's no sense of ownership there. They are people who choose to play with me. Sure. Like, I just, it's faster to say it that way, but I don't share that mentality.
I get it. It's a shorthand.
Right. So, like, we had, for the Monday Sword and Sorcery table, that's really what it's called. They had, oh God, I want to say 6 or 7 sessions, maybe more, of a adventuring, like, tournament. 10.
Okay.
There were 10 missions, if you want to call them that, in a row. There was no combat in any of those missions, and I used a real world timer that I did not pause once I said go, whether they spoke above table or not. And they knew that going in, right? Like, You got 15 minutes from when before I hit go, you get to ask all the questions about the scenario you want. But as soon as I hit go, I'm not going to pause it except for our 15-minute break. We have to go to the bathroom. If it happens to run into that. Aside from that, talk, don't talk, you're on your roll. And we did 10 of those in a row, and it was awesome. And the prize was, I think, 10,000 gold. It was a lot of money. Entrance to the guild, which is a big time adventuring conglomerate that they don't have to pay for. Usually have to pay for that every month for like a year. Where it's a dues thing. They just get membership. And lots of quest opportunities. It's a big deal. It takes them from we adventurers to adventurers. And after that, I wanted to, let them know that you have just stepped off of if it was an MMO, you just stepped off the tutorial island. You've gone from an old-fashioned MMO level 1 to 5 range, the zone, to one where you better bring healing potions or you're going to die. And I wanted to find a way to say that in the chat, because I forgot to say it until we got logged off. That was warning, but not antagonistic, right? Like you want that to sound like the promise of engagement that it is, but not like an antagonistic threat. Like it is kind of a threat, but you don't want to sound like that because then it sounds like you're threatening them, not the environment. Because they haven't seen the environment yet. So any threat they perceive will come from you, whether you want it to or not. So what I went with was, I'm not saying you should be, here we go. Perfect score on an international event, the equivalent of the Jedi Order taking a personal interest in you. International quest opportunities and new magic items. Welcome to the big leagues. I'm not saying you should be concerned. You definitely earned it. I'm saying bring your brown pants. And there was, I really considered whether or not to put a joke in there. I went with yes, but I'm constantly reconsidering what I said before I say it, like the draft button on an email before I say anything in chats, not necessarily to restrict what I'm going to say, but to change how I was going to say it a little bit. And I don't feel like I'm abandoning who I am, because then once we actually play in person, there's really no edit there.
There's no reason to.
Right. So we did not get to paladins, and I will have to apologize to the person who asked. We'll have to do that next time.
We touched on it a little bit, and I do believe that again, and it might be worth going a little bit more into on how to do above table dynamics with other players when you're not the GM. As a GM, it's relatively intuitive because you have to do it all the time. But I understand that as a player, you're not faced with this as commonly.
Right. While I definitely want to talk about it, if it like deeper, I think the simplest, like quickest way to be a paladin and not be thick about it is whatever your boundaries are, whatever your rules are, whatever your tenets are, blah, 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 blah. Theft is wrong. That doesn't mean you tell other people not to steal. It means you don't, right? Those tenets are yours, not somebody else's. That's usually how cut and dry that is for me. Like, Solomon Kane is the most zealoty of zealots I think I've ever read. Him and Moon Knight, they're right up there. Like, Solomon Kane is a literal Puritan. I don't know if it gets more zealotous than that. And he does not put people down for things he finds wrong most of the time. He only puts people down he only like kills people for doing things he thought was wrong when those things are like murder. But he also thinks drinking is just as wrong as murder and does not kill people over it because it is their right to do to their body what they want. You don't have a right to somebody else's body, so he'll kill you over it. And that may feel like a weird line in the sand to draw, but he's a zealot. What do you want? Like, just whatever your tenets are, do not flex on that. That's it. Just don't make space, don't make space in your psychology for cracks in the wall, which makes for great RP because that means your GM can absolutely plan what happens if you find a paladin who is adamantly anti-theft, right? And then you encounter a paladin who is pro-theft. Like in the Elder Scrolls, the Khajiit are a playable race, they're cat people. To them, theft, there is no such thing as theft. To take from another person is to jest with them because a person is, in no small part, from their point of view, the things they have. Franco is Franco the person and Franco the stuff. So if you take Franco's stuff, you are just horsing around with Franco. And if Franco gets upset about it because he says you stole from me, that's because Franco doesn't know how to take a joke. Like, it's to them, it's not a crime. It's a mark of respect. You only fuss with people you like.
True.
So if you were a paladin or one of those, and a paladin who's like, theft is punishable by death. Now what? Like,
So the way that I've always expressed this to my players is that this is the adventure we are playing, because it's the stuff, not only is the stuff that I have prepared, but it's the stuff that we agreed to play at the beginning. Like this was the advertised piece. See what I mean?
right.
So you need to find a reason for your character to go along with this. And if that means that your oath of whatever paladin, because I don't know all these by heart, normally would not allow this other character to do this. Normally they would not stand for it. Since this is the adventure you're on, feel free to convolute your backstory as needed, or do whatever you want to make it so that this is the adventure we're on.
My usual go for that isn't it's the same end result. Tweak the thing you need to, but I usually don't go with, unless they really want to, I don't usually go with the oaths in the book, because they're impersonal. The players didn't make those. If you want to become a paladin to, I don't know, Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother, that's an actual paladin oath somebody made. The oath of the Brotherhood. Here's how you
bro code.
Or the bro code, right? That oath is a couple of tenets. Like, it's, I think, 5 tenets long. Those tenets are pretty cast iron, like the 10 Commandments are cast iron. Are they unreasonable sometimes? Sure. But that's what makes you a zealot, your unwillingness to change when perfectly sane other options are on the table. It doesn't matter. You're a zealot, though. That is how you live. Hard stop. But that hard stop does not have to include what you would do to other people. It just what you'll do to you. The answer in this case is you won't. Like, you won't. If you're anti-theft, say, and the mission says that theft is required, you don't have to find a way to fit in. You just don't do it. You go, hey, I'm not gonna, you will have to do this mission without me while I pray for your sins instead. Will the rest of the party have to make adjustments to the lack of holy power you bring to the table? Yes, it also makes total sense in world. And that's great, because it gave you the spotlight to act on how your character acts. And it gave them the spotlight to figure out how to function without you. So when they succeed, they'll feel cooler than they did before.
That's not a bad alternative to have. And you know what you can do, and this is just kind of off the top of my head here, is have a secondary character that, like, all right, my paladin would not go along with this, but this is the adventure we're on today. Like, this is today's game at the table.
Right.
You might have a secondary character that would go along with that. It's like, hey, you know what? You hired it. It could be a henchman. It could be anything. Just someone that would go along with this, so that you, the player, can still play this game and not compromise your character if you don't want to.
Right. You could also have, like, while that player, say the heist is expected to take, I don't know, an hour or two. While it's easy for the player to first say, I'm going to pray for you. Now what? Is he going to twiddle his thumb for those 2 real world hours we sit down and play? No, that's boring. So you could have that player have a backup character. Sure. You could also have, while they're in the middle of their prayer state, something happen outside the lodge, a side quest that's just for them, that leaves them with a positive feeling. And if you're worried about balance, not more items, though I don't usually care about balance. But if you do, you can just have the reward not include tangible stuff like magic items. Or less tangible stuff like NPC friendship that's of value later. But whatever you do, it should end with a positive vibe for them, thus reinforcing the choice they made.
Okay, so I guess we're having a couple of alternatives here. If you want to play this paladin and you really are in love with the character, which is a very valid point, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
You can absolutely be in love with your character and want nothing more than to see this character, do their thing and, but it's just not compatible with today's game at the table. That's okay. You can sub them out, have a different character available. That's always acceptable. You can sit them out and simply say, you know what, I'm going to play, this is another one. I'm going to actually talk to the other character, talk to the other player, and enlist them into what's going to the dynamic and see how we can together make this interesting. Maybe my paladin does not condone thievery, and your character knows this. So there are shenanigans afoot that you have to go through so that I won't find out that you are, stealing stuff. That's another. So
yeah, you could do it like that.
Yeah, just involve them in, or just alternatively, and simply this is if you sit it out, you sit it out, and then we can figure out someone else to integrate your character and have something compensated for you. So there's a couple of options. There definitely are a couple of options, but the only one that I really can say that is not an option is, if you know that you are that it's not your character antagonizing the other character, it's you, the person, antagonizing the other player. That is the only thing that I would say that is what you need to avoid. Find a different solution. Yeah. Because characters antagonizing each other, no problem. People antagonizing each other above table, someone's not going to have fun.
Yeah, that one doesn't work. And depending on the table, player A is Paladin, player B is a Rogue, because you're right, it's the classic antagonism. I'm also partial to two opposing Zealots who can't coexist, who are disagreeing because of what makes them a Zealot. Their specific codes clash. I think, Megatron and Optimus Prime are great examples. Both of them have their ideals and they do not move at all. And they put them in direct opposition of each other because of it. Optimus isn't just in direct opposition with Megatron because he disagrees with him ideologically, because that would just mean they don't like each other. That doesn't mean they'd be in the front line against each other. They're in the positions they're in because their ideals drove them there. Optimus ended up where he is and didn't give the post to someone else because his ideals won't let him. And Megatron ended up at the top of the combat pile because his ideals won't let him be anywhere else, which means no matter how many other Transformers die, they'll still be attacking one another. And I think that there is really that's essentially a Paladin versus an anti-Paladin, not a Paladin versus a Rogue. But the intake is the same. Two people with ideals cannot get along because of their ideals. And if they were to abandon their ideals, they would be different people. So how do you deal with that? I'm partial to the present a greater threat. That one's fun.
Let me just throw this out there. And this is something that is a little bit more for, I have to admit, this is a little bit more for paid DMs than anything else, because in your friend group, there's a lot more maneuverability.
Sure.
But you have to let people know what the adventure is and what at least the main big hook is. As in, we're going on this quest to kill the Overlord. That means that whatever player you play has to be okay with killing. See what I mean? So
I do not have that.
Because you cannot, otherwise that character would not be on this adventure. See what I mean?
I don't agree. I don't think, I think Avatar, which is a well-loved show by millions of people, adamantly disagrees with you, because Ozai, spoilers for an old show, does not die at the end of the show.
That is permanently removed. But the objective was never to kill Ozai. The objective was to free the oppressed.
But if the objective had been framed kill Ozai, it would have felt very contrived to me, which is what you're suggesting, isn't it? The mission is kill that guy. Why do I have to kill that guy? Because that's going to be my first question: is why do I have to kill that guy?
Sure. Or why do I have to? It's the same as why do I have to free the oppressed?
Right. What does he represent in such a way that I could not find some other solution? If there is
Again.
no other solution on the table, I don't think I want to play.
And that is a perfectly valid thing, because remember, and then again, and this is why I'm saying that this is a piece of advice mostly for anyone who wants to do this in a professional capacity, especially if someone who wants to do it like I do, that I am paid by an institution, not by a player, is that I have to, it's like the trailer. I have to show you what you're gonna be playing. And then the only thing that you have to do is, so I need to come up with a character for this campaign, because that's the one on offer. And this campaign implies that we are going to be sneaking, in this case.
I see what you mean. The murder was just an example. You mean that here's the campaign.
It could be anything. I need
a guy who fits in. Yeah, right. Sure.
So it was the example I was using just because we're talking about paladins and otherwise. But if you have to deliver on something, and I do believe that your session 0 is a great option for this. But if you are like me, that you have an adventure that you are accepting players no matter what, because who's paying you to run the adventure is not the player. So whoever comes and plays shows up. You're selling tickets, I guess, is the way I would say it.
Right.
And you have to tell them what the ticket is for. You have to tell them, hey, in this adventure, this is what is expected as a standard thing that we're going to be doing every now and then, stealing or dealing with political intrigue or whatever it is. You need a character that would go along with this.
Sure.
You can't have a character that would say, I would never lie to the king, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I think you were a step above me in like the meta discussion. What you're saying is that the concept of playing a paladin who doesn't fit in is pre-solved by having psychological buy-in from the players, because you're going to do X. So they would make a character who fits into X.
That is exactly right. Because in my case, I need to be slightly less flexible than you are because of how I am set up for my gig.
That's totally makes sense. Psychological buy-in is a great idea for literally everything at the table. It doesn't solve which we don't have time for. We'll have to do it next time.
No.
How do you play a paladin who fits in, but is kind of a dick? Like, how do you step around? How do you play a self-righteous character who isn't, a self-righteous character? My
solution was definitely for the DM, not for the player. But I do believe that a self-righteous character is not wrong. You just need to move the story around in such a way that either the self-righteousness is, it's okay. That's just part of what we're going to deal with, and that's going to be some inter-party conflict. And if everyone's okay with that, that's cool. In which case, include the other players, make sure that everyone's comfortable, that sort of thing. Or the other solutions, sub them out. Do a different character this week, whatever it is. But if that character matters to you as a player that much, you have to answer to yourself, does the character matter to me? Does he have to be incorruptible? Otherwise, I don't enjoy playing him. In which case it throws you to one option, which is, sub him out this week. Have some reason for which he didn't find out about this.
Right. Have some selection off the list of option B. Right.
Or is he important because you identify as this character, you want to play him, the skills are cool, and you want to play these particular skills and abilities, and what you want is the mechanics of that character, but he doesn't really fit with the rest of the stuff. Then in that case, that's when you can, do the whole, we're going to find a reason for it. He's gonna find the exception or whatever.
That's a conversation we should definitely dig into next time. Like, I have a player right now who is in every way playing a paladin, except he is playing a warlock instead. Like, behaviorally, he's a paladin. He has his set of beliefs, and they don't move, and they're almost entirely morally upstanding, to the point that it makes other people go, you goody two shoes, brat. Right? Like, he is playing that kind of paladin, but he's not. He's playing a warlock instead. What's weird to me is, in my brain, I don't consider those to be particularly different. The only difference is that the warlock. So D&D, Chris, I think it's Crawford, said that the warlock, he did not expect players. Like, it's not Not like he was expected, he didn't expect it, and then he discovered it and went, wow, that's different. I didn't think of that. More like, I thought of that and it's not what I wanted. Don't do that. The class isn't designed for it. Is that the warlock, the backstory where the pact happened and you did whatever it is to get your warlock powers? Chris did not design the concept for, or is it Jeremy? Jeremy did not design the warlock with the expectation that you and the patron would ever talk again, that he would be a character, like a background character involved in your story at all. The business, the deal happened back there, and there's no discussion about it. You're not talking, you're not friends. It was a business transaction. It was strictly professional. It happened one time, get out, move on. So lots of stories where like you're talking with your patron and he says, I'll give you more power if you do X. I'll take away your power if you don't do Y. The class is not designed for any of that. But in my experience, lots of players want that. If you include that, you're like this far away from a paladin who has an ongoing conversation with their god from which they get their powers. The only difference is the warlock is usually creepy and the paladin usually isn't. But that's just window dressing. That's just behavior or presentation, I suppose. If the power is not yours and it comes from a higher being and they can take it from you if you don't do things their way, aren't you just a holy warrior? Doesn't that include warlocks, clerics, paladins, dark knights, which are just evil paladins, and a pile of other crap? But in his brain, that's not the case. In his brain, the warlock, we had this entire conversation about how the designers did not design it that way. And he went, huh, that's really dumb. I totally thought of doing it that way. Like he has conversations with his patron all the time. Who is functionally a higher being who says, do X and I will give you Y. Y is almost always more power. I mean, you're fighting.
Interesting. So
you're basically a paladin. Like,
and
he
you know
doesn't
what?
see it that way at all.
No, but you are, I don't know, because
As opposed to like, go ahead.
I've always thought, so this is my personal headcanon, so this might not, mean anything to anyone, as usual. But in my personal headcanon, the paladin, it's not that they didn't actually get anything from their deity. They got it from their belief. That's what their oath. So if you've ever played Mage the Ascension, for example, or
I have.
If that's how their magic works. If they believe it's strong enough, then the world works that way.
So you're saying
that was the oath that like I believe in this so much that the universe will comply.
Okay. See, that option only mechanically exists. Do what you want, but it only mechanically exists in 5th edition D&D, wherein you don't need a god. In older editions, you absolutely needed one. The standing belief was that the standing assumption was that power was not yours. You got it from someone else. You're essentially a cleric who chose the sword instead of a book. But the argument, the end result is the same. You have martial training and the cleric doesn't. And the cleric has better healing than you, but you're functionally the same character concept. You're a person who heard the call and met the demand, and a higher being, usually a good one, but not always. There's an entire section in, I think, 2nd edition called The Plethora of Paladins, which had a paladin for literally every alignment on the grid at the time. So this whole argument that paladins can't be evil is ridiculous, and it has been since like 1986, but whatever.
Sure.
It's not your power. It's on loan, a conditional loan. And 5e definitely makes the space for a paladin who is what you described. But like with the mage, it's really not that different because it is still not the mage's power. It's the universe bending to their will, but it's still the universe's power. If the universe's structure changed, the mage wouldn't be able to access what's not there. They're not digging deep into themselves. They're pulling from outside of themselves, which is different than your inner fire, your inner determination.
The thing again, and that is just my headcanon for it, which is why for me it always worked out that paladins don't. I mean, it's not that they are dicks about things; it's that they are unwavering in their conviction. Because if they waver, there is no power.
Right,
It's
right.
like- it's the Green Lantern ring. Either
Right,
you
yeah.
have
See,
the will,
that's willpower.
or you
That is
don't.
interior. Hal Jordan's fire, his ability to power his ring, does come from within, not without.
Exactly right. And that is and that again, that is my headcanon for paladins, because the oaths don't have anything to do with an external force. They have everything to do with what they believe. There's the oath of pacifism paladin. There's the oath of vengeance. Oh, and they have nothing to do with God, goods, or otherwise. And they just have to do with, do I believe this thing so much that it actually gives me power? Much like a sorcerer that is born with it, that doesn't need the belief. What they have is that they just have an intuitive understanding of the weave.
See, that's interesting to me. For me, the sorcerer's not like that. The sorcerer has, it's not an intuitive understanding. It's a literal magic battery that sits inside them somewhere. A magic tank of mana that they got because somewhere in their past, their parents or grandparents or grandparents' parents bumped uglies with a magical being. Like they essentially got the genetic cheat code. They just weren't expecting.
You know what?
What is
you know what,
intrinsic
possibly I was-
belief? Go
No, you're absolutely right. I think I'm thinking a little bit more about the oh my god, guy that sings,
The bard.
the bard. Yeah, the bard,
Right.
who is not trained in magic, just intuitively
does it.
understand.
Right,
Like
right.
yeah, so you're absolutely right. Yeah, the sorcerer is the one that just inherits the thing. Yeah, but I always thought about it a little bit like that. So it's a little bit more, it's a little bit different in my head, because you have to be a zealot to be a paladin.
You do. Yeah.
If you lose it, you have no power, literally. So yeah, you definitely want to drive that. But being a zealot doesn't give you everything. It just gives you the power it says in the book, so to speak. It doesn't mean that you that you find out about everything, which comes back to talk to the other player. All right, you have to steal, and I have to hate stealing. And I have to, like, part of my oath, part of the thing that I believe in is that if I don't stop you, like, what am I doing? And that will cause me my loss
For
of
me,
power.
that's where the line is. That's how you go from being a righteous paladin, but not a self-righteous paladin, not a jerk about it. That right there. I have to hate that you're stealing, but I don't have to beat you up over it. I just can't participate. I have to look at you like you've disappointed me morally, and you did. But I don't have to beat you up about it. I don't have to hold it against you, because your life is just that. Your life. You didn't take the oath I did. You don't share the God I share. I'm going to morally judge you, but we're still a team, because for the time being anyway, we're working together to serve X, blah, 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 blah.
So yes, but so here's the thing. I don't know your player who asked this, but I can, if I had to guess, I'm thinking that part of their understanding of their own paladin character
They're
is
not
that
actually playing one.
oh, okay. So there is at least off the top of my head, I can think of one that is canon in 5th edition, which is the oath of the watch, or of the guardian paladin, I believe it is. That they stop interplanar invasions.
Right.
Anything that's from a different plane, they have to either eliminate, stop, or otherwise.
Right.
So let's say that you're one of these paladins, and your oath obligates you to action, literally. That is part of your,
Okay, you're saying that the option for me to just not be okay with it I can't look at you and be like disappointing, but do nothing. That option isn't on the table.
at least for this one, at least for this type of one paladin.
Right. In this example,
there
that
might
option's
be
not
more.
on the table.
This is the one that I have at the top of my head. So let's say that in this case, it's not. Let's say that it's some other magic user, a wizard, sorcerer, bard, or otherwise.
Yeah.
Let's say that they open or they summon a creature. They summon an elemental from whatever it is. At that point, that paladin, for his oath, has to try to stop this. Has to either try to stop the summoning if he knows it's going to happen.
Well,
or
hold on.
to eliminate that creature.
Who did the summoning? Do I know this person?
Even if it's a party member.
You specifically said invasion, right?
Yeah.
Like me calling in for cosmic backup for 5 minutes counts as an invasion to nobody. That's an egregious overuse of the term. If you, as my party member, call in a demon for 10 minutes, and I know that because I bothered to get to know you and I know how long summoning lasts for.
Sure.
I don't actually know.
Sure. Let's assume that you have the information. Sure.
Right. I have the information to know that this is a temporary deal. I do nothing. I watch you carefully. and maybe question your methods, but I don't kill you or the creature, particularly if that creature is going to help keep me alive, because I can't serve my god's methods if I'm dead. If I think that backup is required in order for us to win, then I'm going to get over it for the greater good. If that is a completely different scenario than if the bad guy, we've been playing for 6 months and I know who the big bad is, and his plan is to tear open a portal in space and time, and it's Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat, and he's coming through with all of those Baraka creatures whose name I forget right now, the Tarkans or something. He's coming through the portal with 50,000 Tarkans. He's going down, and he's going down with extra fervor, but I'm not a self-righteous jerk in that case, because the whole campaign wants me to do this. Like, no one's going to give me a hard time for leaning into being a jerk. And Shao Kahn might, but I mean, he's the bad guy, fuck him. Like, but the rest of the party isn't going to judge me for it. And I think those little situations like that are the ones that come up. Like, if you're a paladin and you've taken an oath to not kill anybody, but the rest of the party didn't do that, do you like attempt to prevent them from resolving a combat scenario the way they were going to? I don't think you do. I just think you feel sad about it. You look at them like morally disappointing people, and you like don't look or whatever. And if you can find some way to make it up to, like, if I'm anti-theft and I work with a rogue and he steals a gem that's worth, I believe, say 300 gold, and he steals it from, I don't know, Jane. I'm gonna go meet Jane on purpose and give her at least 300 gold. It's the best I can do if I can't get the gem back. If the gem was temporary, if we needed it to like open a temple door or something, and once the temple door is open, we don't need it anymore, I will go out of my way to get it back when the rogue's done with it. But I won't like take it from him. If he's going to sell it afterwards, again, I will just go buy it back. If he sells it, he sold it to somebody. I'll go buy it from them and bring it back to Jane. Will that cost me money? Almost certainly. Am I willing to do it? I have to. It's in my oath. I don't have a choice. I'm compelled to do it. And I think that zealot like sheet of tenets is a really powerful thing for both storytelling, but and just general play. But I also think that if there's a line to be found between being a righteous character and being like a yucking on everybody else's yum to the point where they're not having any fun and they roll their eyes and go, "Oh, paladin." We can't. I think that might go too far, which is why a lot of really great paladin stories in books are about one guy, because there isn't a bunch of people in the party to go, "Oh, paladin." Solomon Kane travels by himself. Moon Knight has a really hard time keeping friends.
Yeah, that's true. So if I'm interpreting what you're saying, you're saying that have your tenants, and be lawyerly about them. Like, okay, like, absolutely. What does the actual tenant say? Does it say I have to do this, or do I like? No.
Yeah, like there's a bit. Solomon Kane is a party of one, and I think that's important for the situation. I don't think this would work in a. This wouldn't work out of the box. You'd have to like. It would only work some of the time at the table. Sure. Solomon Kane is traveling across the frozen wastes somewhere, and he is attacked. Essentially, the short version is Solomon Kane reunites with a lifelong friend, one of his only friends. That friend has had a child who has grown into a young man since Solomon Kane has been away. When Solomon realizes that his boy is now a lycanthrope, he sets a trap to kill him and says, "Hey, best friend, your son has been replaced by Satan spawn." And because he goes, what are you doing? He goes, "Oh, I'm setting up a silver trap to catch the werewolf." And he goes, "I knew about that. The werewolf was my son." And he goes, "No, the werewolf, that thing was your son. Now it's an agent of Satan. I'm going to kill it. You also have to help me kill it because you are also a Puritan and you took the same oath I did." And he sadly agrees. It's his son. He doesn't want to. For him, it's not as cut and dry as it is for Cain, because it's not Cain's son. He ultimately agrees to help, but when it comes right down to it, when it's time to shoot him, he can't do it. Cain doesn't make him do it. Cain shoots him. Cain shoots the son and then says, you failed as a Puritan, but you also succeeded as a Puritan. He went, how do you figure? And he went, you failed to do the right thing in the last moment, but I understand that you are captured by your weakness. That thing looks like your son. I don't approve, but I understand. He goes, now my heart will hurt forever. And he goes, yeah, you're a Puritan. That's what it means. You pardon the whole attaboy. and he leaves. Like, Cain shows no remorse at all for the creature that he shot. None. At all. Zero. And gives just the tiniest itty bitty shred of consideration for his friend. But it didn't change what Cain did. It just changed the end result. He said, hey, look, that sucks, basically. Like, I understand you were weak, but I understand why you were weak, which is the closest thing to a compassionate remark I think he makes in that entire book. Like, but he shot them anyway. Like,
I have to read these books.
And for me, that's a great example of Solomon's absolute black and white worldview. Because he made an accommodation, an emotional accommodation. He understood somebody else's worldview, that for them, those black and gray lines that are black, like in his friend, he sees that his friend's world is also black and white, just like his. They're the same black and white because they're Puritans together. But that creature looks like his friend's son. And Cain isn't like immune to the idea that you might not want to kill a thing that looks like one of your children. Like, he understands, but it didn't ultimately change what he did. He was like, I empathically make space for your weakness, but I don't not see it. It's still weakness. Like, yeah. And I think that's a great example of a paladin being righteous, but not self-righteous. He's the same guy he was, and he didn't compromise at all, but he made space for the compromise you made. Very little space, but he made some. Whereas if that lycanthrope hadn't looked like anybody's son that he knew, there would have been no compensation at all. Even though it had to look like somebody's son, it just wouldn't be somebody Cain knew personally. If it looks like a human, it's somebody's kid, right? It looks like somebody's kid, it's not somebody he knows. Oh yeah, I would totally recommend Cain and the new Moon Knight run if comics are more your jam. Like, it's really, really good.
You know, I get absolutely, but
he is. Cain is an unwavering. He's an ass. Like, he's an ass.
Basically, he's an ass.
He would not travel well with a party. Absolutely not. He would not fit in at all. But lots of people, when they play a paladin, they want to have that kind of zealot viewpoint and behavior because it's different, because most people don't live like that. Most people have differing sets of opinions in different situations. Most people see the world as gray. I personally don't, but most people do. So
I disagree.
If fantasy is just playing somebody you aren't, right? If fantasy is the opposite of reality.
Sure.
No. You might sit down, people might deliberately, and I think often do, sit down to play people that are not like them.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
If the world is gray to you, then you sit down to play a black and white character. You don't have any practice. That's why it's fantasy, because you don't know how to do it. It's not you, which means you have no practice, which means you're probably gonna fuck it up. You're gonna overdo it and hurt your friends' feelings and yuck on their yum. And don't do that. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to play that black and white super rigid character. It just means that maybe, read a questionnaire on how to not be a jerk about it.
True. Now, yeah, I think so. So different approaches, and I think you added a one that's very, very important, which is, you know what? Be as strict and to the rules of your tenants as possible, you will find the exceptions.
Oh yeah, you will. If the world is black and white for you, eventually somebody's going to come at you with some gray on purpose, just to see if they can find a crack in there. They're going to pusher you, because lots of people like to be confrontational. Like, my wife does not see the world like I do at all, and we argue about it all the time. And that's a lot of fun.
I agree. I have a wife that does not see the world the way I do, at almost no turn, and she's a lawyer, so
Oh, that's true. Yeah. How is
Interesting
that?
times.
Amber's not a lawyer. That would be a whole nother thing.
it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. I highly recommend it.
You recommend marrying a lawyer? Did I hear that right? You want to put that on the book?
Absolutely,
Franco recommends marrying a lawyer.
100% recommend marrying a lawyer. They are extraordinarily fun.
Good to
But no, yeah,
It-
you do have to, and you do have to learn how to see things like, all right, what's the intention and what's the actual root?
Right.
And-
Intention is a lot of things, like the summoning example. If you were summoning a guy to back us up and he's going to be gone in 10 minutes, I argue that's not an invasion. Like,
Yeah, and actually, just because you made me doubt, I actually looked up the tenets of that particular oath, and you know what? I was wrong. Yeah, you could definitely have someone, because the tenets don't say that you have to do anything about it. They
like
actually-
I think, but I think you stepped on something really useful there when you use the phrase "call to action." I think the difference between the tenets of a righteous paladin and the tenets of a self-righteous paladin is the presence and interpretation of the parts of the book that make you go to action, particularly if those actions would affect other people. And arguable if they don't, I'm not even sure they count as actions. If it doesn't change the environment around you, is it really an action, or are you just like thinking? Like, so I think if murder is wrong,
don't
well,
murder.
yeah, don't murder, but don't murder other people who murder. That doesn't make sense. Like,
Also, if murder is wrong, what are you doing as an adventurer?
yeah, right. Like,
I don't know.
are you gonna how on earth? I mean, it might be easy to not kill another bandit, particularly if your strength and con score is really high, and you can just, like Terry Crews from for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and you can just like pick him up, tie him up with your other hand, and leave him.
Yeah.
But I mean, eventually you're going to go up against some creature that's big enough or scary enough or inhuman enough, like a demon or something, that don't kill, period. Don't kill the innocent. Don't kill children. I mean, is there a qualifying mark, or is it just don't kill, period? Because in that case, I'm not sure adventuring's your jam.
Yeah, no.
And that's
a lot of
like, don't kill don't kill unless it absolutely is you or them, and you tried everything else first. That's kind of vague, but you might be able to get some mileage out of that. There's an awful lot of weight in the word everything in that sentence. Anyway, I don't want to keep you forever.
But I agree. So there are ways, and I like your lawyerly approach more than any other. Stick to the rules. Read it carefully, and find the loopholes in your tenets.
These are tenets you agreed to adhere by for the rest of your life. Well, I mean, as long as you want the power, anyway. It literally pays you to read the contract.
I like that approach. I like that a lot. I think it's a very functional approach to this whole situation. Yeah,
Hey, thanks.
for sure.
So I imagine you want to go have dinner. So do I. We'll do this
Yes,
then
I do.
next week?
So we've gone almost for 2 hours, which is
which is-
delightful.
oh, thanks.
But it is. We do have to actually get back to